So welcome, guys. This is so great to have you here. I thought, again, as we did last time, we might ask you each to take a few minutes and introduce your work, show a few slides or a little video, and then we can have a conversation. Maxime.
So I actually won't use it.
Excellent. No need.
But I'll pass it along already. So thank you so much for the invitation. It's quite fantastic to be here, to be representing Ubisoft Montreal and the team that worked on the Discovery Tour. So what I do basically is being a usurper. I think on this panel, I'm a historian by trade, and this is what I do at Ubisoft Montreal. I help the team to build historical credibility on the game and the franchise that it's called Assassin's Creed. And so our latest installment was Assassin's Creed Origins that take place at the time of Cleopatra in ancient Egypt. And then from this, we created a new experience that felt like it was a natural development out of that game, is to create a platform for education. So we created the Discovery Tour that is presented upstairs, where our goal is really to reuse that digital environment of ancient Egypt and to withdraw it from the game, from the narrative, from the conflict scenario, and then instead focusing on making people immerse themselves into ancient Egypt, discover that rich culture, go into the pyramids, climb over them, go into Alexandria. And so really it's a fantastic opportunity to be here and to talk about this with all of you guys and learn more also about VR and how we can grow into digital experiences. And really happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Eliza.
All right. Thank you so much for having us. And also, I did have an opportunity to try that yesterday, and I got to be Cleopatra. So it's a very cool experience. I am a writer and director. I'm a filmmaker and a virtual reality artist. My piece that's playing here is called Fistful of Stars. And it's a virtual reality exploration of the cosmos alongside the Hubble telescope, which takes you inside of the birth, life, and death of a star. And I created this in collaboration with Jess Engel, who was on the panel before me. And it was a virtual reality experience that premiered alongside a live space opera. So I'm sure that's a very confusing idea, which I'll get into later of what actually happened. And so I actually do have a trailer to show you.
We search for origins of the universe and of life within it. Stars are born, they live, and they die. Enter Hubble, a real time machine.
So that's Fistful of Stars, which is playing upstairs. My work focuses on the intersection of science and art, and my passion includes working with all kinds of scientists, from astrophysicists to astronauts, to bring these kinds of stories to life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Paul Raphael. I'm a co-founder and creative director at Felix and Paul Studios. Felix and I have actually been working together for close to 14 years now, right out of school. We started off as a directing duo in film, advertising, music videos, and eventually got into more experiential storytelling, installation art, worked with Cirque du Soleil, Moment Factory, companies like that. And eventually, almost exactly 5 years ago now, we just celebrated our 5th anniversary. We started Felix and Paul Studios, which is exclusively focused on virtual reality and now augmented reality storytelling. So here upstairs, you can see one of our latest pieces, which is a fake behind the scenes of Wes Anderson's latest stop-motion animation film, Isle of Dogs. So it was actually co-directed with Wes Anderson. And I have a clip here myself.
Well, Chief is a stray dog who is rounded up with all the dogs in the city of Megasaki. And he's been exiled on this island to live out his days in discomfort because there's a fear of dog flu. It's not real. but the rhetoric and the propaganda against dogs is believed. So every dog from the city is put on this island called Trash Island. It's the island where they dump all the trash.
And also we're also showing Space Explorers, another piece we made, which is a documentary on space exploration we created in collaboration with NASA and SpaceX. That's a 20-minute piece. This is a 5-minute piece, but I encourage you to see both if you haven't already.
Hello, everyone. Céline Tricart. I'm a storyteller, originally from France. I live in Los Angeles, and I'm the founder of Lucid Dream Productions. I was the producer and co-director of a piece that is shown here called The Sun Ladies, which is a hybrid documentary mixing live action and animation about the Yazidi women who were captured as sex slaves in Iraq, and when they escaped, they decided to join the army and fight back. So we premiered that film at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year, and in the month leading to the festival, me and my co-producer Maria Bello were trying to find ways to present the film. It's a 360 film, but in a more immersive way, and that's what I'm going to be showing a little video about how we built multiple events and experiences around the film, and to try to present it in many different ways for the audience. And since then, we've been touring different festivals and trying to show as much as those experiences as we can. Sometimes it's just the film, sometimes it's the film plus something more, as you'll see. So let's take a look at the video.
The Sun Ladies is an immersive and interactive experience composed of 4 compelling acts. The first act is an installation. The participants are invited to walk into a tent where some traditional music from Kurdistan is playing. The space is dressed like one of the thousands of refugee tents in Iraq. This way, the participants can immerse themselves in the world of the story first, and then they are given a VR headset. Act 2 is a 7-minute, 360-degree hybrid documentary about the Sun Ladies. In 2014, when ISIS invaded Iraq, they took thousands of women and girls as sex slaves. Some of them who escaped decided to fight back. They called themselves the Sun Ladies. The film is a mix of live-action footage and virtual reality animation in 6K and stereoscopic 3D. The animation, designed by artist Wesley Alsbrook, is gracefully integrated with the use of intuitive transitions, blending the two worlds together. The spatial sound and music immerse the participants seamlessly into the world of the Sun Ladies. After watching the film, they remove their headsets only to find themselves in the real world, faced with 3 fierce women. Act 3 is a spoken word performance, augmenting and blurring the lines between virtual and real worlds. Inspired by the Sun Ladies of Iraq, the 3 actresses express how they will fight back in their own way against sexual oppression, engaging the audience in a personal and emotional manner.
I rage to engage my faculties to attest to your sins, and we will win!
After the performance, the participants are invited to reflect on the experience and write a letter to the Sun Ladies. We want the Sun Ladies experience to be an agent of change, both in the United States and abroad, by raising awareness about these extraordinary fighters and their bravery. Morale on the front lines is as important as weapons. VR is known as an empathy machine, but empathy needs to be practiced. This is why the Sun Ladies crew is returning to Iraq this year to deliver the letters directly to the women and build a bridge between the two worlds so far apart. The Sun Ladies VR experience is pushing the boundaries on how interactive media can become even more engaging, rewarding, and relevant.
That That was great. Thank you, guys. So I want to, and gals, I'd like to have us start by asking each of you to share the inspiration behind the creation of the work that you've shown. What was the seed that got you going on these projects? Celine, why don't we start at your end?
So the Maria Bello has heard like in a meeting randomly a few years ago about those women, and she became obsessed with their story, and she knew right away it was going to be a VR experience. She didn't even want to bring a 2D camera or any of that. So she reached out to me. That was probably a year and a half ago in Los Angeles, and we sat down for breakfast, and I was not expecting anything. I was like, oh, this is another meeting about a VR project. And she started telling me about the story of those women. And that was during when, like, the peak of the war against ISIS, when Mosul, it was still during the Battle of East Mosul at the time. And after the meeting, I went back to my car and I called my parents, which is something I never do. Not that I don't like my parents, but I'm a very independent person and I don't need their approval. But I called them in France, so I woke them up at like 1 a.m. because they've been to the Middle East, and I was like, this is something where I'm going to be risking my life, and I need to talk to them about this. And as I was describing the story to them on the phone, I started crying in my car, and that's when I was like, okay, I just wanted to tell you that, but I think I've taken my decision already. And it was like, this is the one thing I am born to tell that story. There is no way around it. This is exactly the type of story I want to tell. This is exactly what I want to do. I'm so scared. It doesn't matter. Just go. And so it was three of us, my co-director, Christian Stefan, and a producer, Dylan Roberts. They are both war journalists. They've been to Iraq 26 times. And so I felt I was safe with them. And so I was there to focus on the VR storytelling and connecting with the woman. And they were there to keep me alive and help me navigate a country at war. And that's how it happened.
Wow, it's very powerful. Paul?
So this was actually an idea Wes Anderson had. So, partly at least. So he knew he wanted to make a fake behind-the-scenes virtual reality experience where you would somehow be on the set and in the film at the same time, and that you would be basically talking to the dogs as if they were the actors of the film. So instead of being in a scene of the film, it's almost as if you were catching the dogs between shots during filming, but there's no filming because it's a stop motion animation where every second of animation takes days. So we went to London where they were shooting the film and had this incredible studio with tons of little rooms where they were shooting scenes in parallel, and to basically see how we could help shape this and how we could shoot this. We had to figure out how do you shoot 360 3D stop motion animation over months, because we literally shot this for about 4 or 5 months in parallel to the tail end of production of Isle of Dogs, the movie. And we basically looked around at the sets and were like, well, how what's the best way to kind of stage this and to shoot this? And working with the team of the animation team of Isle of Dogs, crafted a miniaturized simulation of our actual VR camera. So basically what we wanted to do is put you in the experience at the scale of the dogs. So the puppets are actually about this big, but if you put on the VR headset and do the experience, they appear life size. So that's one thing we wanted to do. And we also wanted to show basically both timelines of the reality of animation. For example, the dog in front of you is moving and talking to you, but really, like I said, it takes days, if not weeks, to produce this animation. So if you actually look behind you, you see the animators at time-lapse speed in sync with the animation of the dogs. So the dogs are normally took 10 days to animate, let's say 30 seconds. So if you look at the dogs, you see 30 seconds of footage, and and behind you, you see 10 days going by at just kind of zipping by. And also, if you pay careful attention, you will see on the monitors a video of Wes Anderson himself, and this blew my mind. But it turns out that if you see Isle of Dogs or Fantastic Mr. Fox or this piece, every single character in the films or in this experience is actually acted out by Wes Anderson himself. So he directs the actors to get the voice performance, but then he acts out, all the little movements and tics and facial mannerisms himself, which the animators use as a reference to animate the dog. So you're literally seeing Wes everywhere when you're watching Isle of Dogs or this piece or Fantastic Mr. Fox, which completely blew my mind. So yeah, that's...
It just makes me think of when you look closely at a Picasso and you can see the paint strokes of the artist. Here we see the fingerprint of the artist in the piece, or the filmmaker in the piece, but it's literally his shadow all over the place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a mad genius. Yeah.
So Fistful of Stars, my muse was the Hubble telescope. And the experience takes you through the eyes of the Hubble and inside of the Orion Nebula, which is thousands of light years away. And I was first approached by a performing arts organization in New York City called National Sawdust. And they had written the opera in collaboration with Dr. Mario Livio, who is an astrophysicist who worked on Hubble for 24 years and made some of the most pivotal discoveries of our time. And they came to me and said, we want to make an experience that makes you feel like you're floating in the stars. And it didn't need to be VR, but in my mind, I felt like there was nothing else to truly transport you into the cosmos like VR. I didn't realize that this would be a performance for 6,000 people, live, outdoors, and each and every one of them would need their own cardboard VR headset. So then began another whole side of the journey of actually making the piece. But what inspired me most was this idea that with our eyes, we can only see so much. And yet, we've created these instruments like Hubble who allow us to expand our imaginations into these worlds beyond our own. And I wanted to give you the experience of what it would be like to become a star and to ride through the Orion Nebula to the pockets of this nebula that we've only seen through images of the Hubble, and for the first time to actually put you there. So that was sort of what, those were all the seeds of what inspired me.
Thank you. So the Discovery Tour started about 4 years ago, but actually had been in our mind for 9 years. So Assassin's Creed has been ongoing for 11 years. Sorry with the dates, you'll figure it out. But we've been creating worlds every time. So recreating the Crusades, recreating the Italian Renaissance, recreating cities and real environments. And through that experience, a lot of people were telling us, you have a great game here, but you could do so much more for schools, for museums, for instance. Why don't you do a version for us where you strip away the narrative and the conflicts? And so it had been in our minds for a long time. And while it seems simple, it actually was very, very difficult to make. So for the last 4 years, it was that whole process of thinking, how can we change the experience? How can we program the next game also to make this possible? Because the way that people in the crowd react to your character, for instance, is not the same in an educational game than in the normal game of Assassin's Creed. Then thinking about the whole process of who are we talking to? Are we creating this discovery experience, this learning experience for our own players who are playing Assassin's Creed, or for newcomers to video games, for museums, for instance, for schools? So we were trying to please everyone while trying to go with the best experience possible. So throughout these 4 years, it was really a huge learning curve for us, and a very good stretch of technology also. So it's a team of 35 people, all volunteers, among the Assassin's Creed team who created this in about 6 months in total in terms of production. So from the historian's text to adapting with the writer, creating new camera systems for this new experience, reshuffling all the design behind the game. It was an incredible experience where we didn't know in the end if the product was going to be great, but we threw all of our hearts into it, and we were surprised by how good the feeling is in the end, and very proud about it. So yeah, that's the discovery tool right now.
Thank you. So I was once told that the way you test a mathematical theorem is by the extreme points, looking at the extreme points. So I'm going to ask you guys, what was the moment when you thought you were going to quit? What was the moment where you thought, there's just no goddamn way I'm going to be able to do this, I'm out of here? And my other little bit of French, j'en ai marre.
Who's starting?
No one has. And by the way, you don't have to answer this. If someone has a good story to share, please share it.
I don't know. That happened so many times during that project. I don't know which moment to pick. It's it's just fighting against current. It's when you're always there's so many things that gets in the way. In our case, it was the money. There's literally zero money behind this project. Everybody worked for free. This is not a sustainable way of doing things, so don't do it, please. But it's just literally, post-production was really hard for me because I had to beg all my friends, all the people I was like remotely friends with, I have to beg them to help me. It's like, hey, can you mix that music for me, please, for free? But I promise it will go to big festivals and you'll have your name and your credits. It's going to be awesome. And after begging and begging, you're so tired of it, and I'm like, I don't want to ever do that ever again. Now, that being said, we're all very proud of the experience. We're proud that it's getting a good momentum in festivals, and I think nobody regrets having worked on that project. But fighting against current all the time.
There were a few things. One of the first sort of major roadblocks we got, and we talked about this upstairs, was when we got. So basically, Wes asked most of the cast of the film to record these interviews, but this was after they had actually recorded the voices for the film. So, Bill Murray, Ed Norton, Scarlett Johansson, Jeff Goldblum, and 6 or 7 other amazing actors were asked to, record audio performances for this piece, and they all agreed. But they all kind of did it their own way. Ed Norton recorded on his iPhone, and you can literally hear the when you're talking like this, and and Bill Murray is recording in, I think he was in a cab ride, so you just hear like engine noises and traffic, and when we got the sound, our sound guy JP was like, can't work with this. Like, this is not only is the audio monoscopic, mono, as in it's not 360 audio, but it's messy, and it's got all sorts of noise, and this is a 360-degree piece where you need to spatialize the audio, and it's a complex process. And he was like, we need to have them re-record. Like, he made a selection, he made a list of like half the cast that needed to be re-recorded. And we're like, dude, we're not going to get Bill Murray to re-record this. There's just no way. And so we had to be creative and integrate these artifacts or these flaws into the scene, because we hadn't yet created, set the sets up or done any of the shooting. So we integrated these flaws into the concept of the scene. So, for example, we literally put a mic in front of Ed Norton's dog, the puppet that he plays, and he's constantly bumping up against it's been painstakingly animated frame by frame, and we put Bill Murray's character in a trash tram, which is another set piece from the film, and he's like you can hear the engine noise of the car, which becomes the engine noise of the trash tram. So that was a fun
that's amazing.
lemonade kind of
situation. Totally tricked me. I never realized that.
This
is amazing. Yeah.
I'm not sure that you're getting a lot of empathy from everyone here about your terrible challenge of having to work with Bill Murray and Ed Norton, and they only got mono sound. So
it was awful. It was just awful.
Well, in your in your case, it looks like it had feed the creative, because I loved that dog bumping into the microphone. I thought it was genius when I watched it. I didn't know it came from the fact that you're at Chili Audio. I love it. You turned it into your advantage. Amazing.
Any other challenging moments?
Yes. So we made Fistful of Stars. We had a 6-month-long timeline, and that included, conceiving the idea to this performance where we were going to have 6,000 people show up and have this live orchestra play. And as we began production, we lost all of our funding. And so we had this moment of, am I being forced to quit? Or are we going to actually do this and make it happen? And so from there, we then had to, we decided we're going to do a Kickstarter. This is a great idea. We're going to do a Kickstarter. I'm reliving the nightmare right now. We're going back to that place. But we decided to make this Kickstarter, and we make an amazing video. I put my whole heart and soul into this Kickstarter video. And by the way, I've never done a Kickstarter before, so it's really important for me that this actually goes well. And we put up the Kickstarter, we send it to everybody we know, and we were trying to raise a lot of money. We raised like $5,000. Complete failure. It's a total failure, and we don't get any of the money we actually needed. And again, we were like, are we going to make this? It has to happen. And then something kind of magical happened. The New York Times announced that the VR film was going to be playing, and suddenly we had to make the project. We had no choice. And so we figured it out, and we found the funding, and we, very lucky that the organization we were working with hustled to make it happen and come to life. But there were a lot of moments along that journey when I thought, this isn't happening. Actually, I didn't think that. I knew it would happen, but it was just how was it going to happen? And so I think for me, it was really important just to stick with it and figure out, how we were going to bring it to life. Because ultimately, it did happen, and it was a wonderful moment. But getting there was not so easy.
That must be quite something. Can't imagine.
Not one failure, but two.
For us, there were so many challenges along the way, simply because we've never done this before. We're a place where we actually make fun video games, and we never did educational video games like that before. Again, so trying to convince people. I mean, we were very lucky that at first our CEO in Paris was thrilled to the idea. He was sold to the idea when we just asked him, basically, can we do this? And he's like, yeah, sure. And now we had to actually produce it. And so, again, just understanding the educational systems around the world, because we were delivering an experience that is worldwide. So just here in Quebec, in Canada, you have 10 provinces. Each province has a different educational system, and then it's like that everywhere in the world. So every time we were discovering this, we were like, well, okay, that's going to be complex to make sure that our game is going to match the educational systems everywhere, because that's impossible. So in every sphere that we were going, we were realizing this. We were realizing that in classrooms, for instance, people don't use the same technologies. Some people use the pen and paper. Maybe you've heard about this before. It's still in use in schools and very useful. I'm kidding, of course, but people are using, in some cases, VR, but that's very exceptional. People are using computers, laptops. Some people are asked to bring their own devices. So we were trying to promote that experience that's going to be very accessible, very accessible in terms of technology and people. And we were realizing that we could not challenge everything. We could not do everything the first time. So we really focused on the content, making sure that we had a good quality of content, a good adaptation of our game to an educational sphere. And then we said, well, you know what? If we can make this once and we have the opportunity to make another discovery tour, then maybe we'll try to tackle the other subjects like accessibility in terms of technology and stuff like that. Everyone asks us, can you make this in VR? And I hope we can, but it's still a big challenge for us.
I remember you mentioning that many of the schools don't have powerful enough computers to basically run your game engine. That seems surprising to me even.
The good point of having a game like Assassin's Creed Origins is that we have amazing artists. They make something that is crazy beautiful and immersive, but that asks for a lot of technology, for a console, a modern day console or a computer. And reality is that a lot of classrooms, they have a computer that's worth $200 that can run Microsoft Word. And so
old version.
Exactly. So for us, it's a very big challenge to be able to adapt our medium to the reality of schools and museums.
So several of you come from a film background, and I'm wondering about your decision and your experience choosing to make works in virtual reality and that evolution for you. Has that been a smooth one? Is it a natural one? And a little bit about how you think about what projects should be in this medium versus, films.
We have kind of the same background-ish. We both come from stereoscopic 3D, making movies and experiences that were immersive at the time. That was shot and project or shot in 3D. And so for me, knowing technology and being in love with storytelling, we always knew that VR was just around the corner, and we're just waiting basically for the technology to catch up. And a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I don't remember, that's when I started thinking, okay, I think now it's the time. And I decided to not stop doing 3D, but really just focus all my energy and work on understanding the VR medium. That being said, I'm still doing traditional content as well. I just think that there's different stories and different ways of telling stories, and sometimes one medium is a better medium to tell a specific story. And so, yeah, now to your second question, and some people would say that any story is great in VR. I would say every story could work in VR. It doesn't mean it would be great. It's if you ask yourself the question, who am I in this story, in this experience, and maybe it means VR could be a good medium for it. Because you're present, even though even some experiences are third person, so you're not being acknowledged by the environment or the people around you. Even for those third-person experiences, you're still kind of there. You try to justify why you're there and what's your position in the story. So if that is interesting, or if that relates to your project or your story, then maybe VR could be a good medium for it. Now you can contradict me.
Well, first of all, reason I started making VR. So like I said, I come from a film background that transitioned into immersive storytelling, and then a couple of years we did a lot of stereoscopic 3D films. But we were making these films as installations. So unlike when you go see Avatar or Gravity or any film in 3D, we were making films that were meant to be shown on specific sized screens in specific rooms from a specific distance. And really, it created a VR-like effect because we could control perspective and scale the same way you do in VR. And we did that for 3 or 4 years. And it was a really clunky but cool thing because it's something you could only see in a museum or at a festival. And so when this new wave of VR started about 5 years ago with the Oculus Rift Kickstarter.
That one was successful.
Yeah, that one was successful. That one was successful. It was kind of, first of all, I couldn't believe that this product could exist at the price they were selling it. But once I got my hands on it, I immediately was like, okay, this is what we've been trying to do. And like, exponentially better than anything we've ever tried to do with 3D and with even the live installation stuff we were doing, at least for us. So we started, building a team, ramping up, trying to build the company to build a camera, because there was no VR cameras at the time. And then what do you do with the footage that comes out of these cameras? How do you play it back? There was no player for it. There was nothing. There was just these tech demos. And in fact, Phi was one of the first group of people, Phoebe, to believe in us and to support us. And I've been doing this for the past 5 years, and there really is nothing I'd rather do. To me, it really is the ultimate medium in that it reproduces reality. If you want to put a film in VR, you can. You can put anything in VR. So I'm convinced it's also the medium of the future. But put VR and AR kind of in the same bucket. And to me, it's just a question of I often use the metaphor of a desktop computer and your interface. You can have a windowed program, or you can go full screen. And VR and AR are essentially windowed versus full screen. It's just that right now we can only optimize for one or the other because of the state of the technology. But eventually, you can wear a pair of streamlined glasses that you can have something integrate your reality or something completely immerse you in another reality, and you could actually play with that back and forth as well. Anyway, all this to say that I think that I can't put a date on it as to when this will become the our main way of interfacing with the digital world. And that I'm talking about entertainment, but I'm also talking about just applications and this social Facebook, all this stuff. I think it's a matter of time before it kind of takes over our traditional, rectangles, smartphones, laptops, TVs, theaters. Will the mediums survive? Yes, probably. I don't think they will be the main source of entertainment, though. So I think movies will probably continue being made for quite a while. But I do think that there will be a tipping point where it will be where immersive media will take over. I don't know when, though, but to me, it does seem inevitable. And everything we do today is, training, really, towards that, because it's a huge challenge. I mean, even our most recent work, the work I'm maybe the most proud of, is still embryonic compared to what it needs to be for compared to the level of maturity cinema or theater or literature has reached. We're 5 years in ourselves, and that's nothing. So technology and our understanding of the medium are going to reach a point where I think that will make it
definitely
our main form
you think about how long it took to develop an organic language of cinema with pans and cuts and montage. That was 25, 30 years. We're 5 years in, really, in VR. I mean, I know things go faster, but we have a long way still to go.
For me, with VR, the question always is, what is the story? And why would this be exciting in VR? Space is obviously a very natural fit for that, because these are places that we won't be able to go. To space, yes, but not to the Orion Nebula yet. But I come from a filmmaking background, and I was, making science-driven narratives that told stories about science and technology, working with people like the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and TED and Google, and making films about astronauts and women who are coding. And so I was very fascinated by ways of telling stories with science. I also come from a science background, researching the vanishing of honeybees around the world. So for me, VR was like a very natural next step to create a story in that space. Before Fistful of Stars, I'd never done VR before. I had my first VR experience in college, or maybe a little after college, and it was the roller coaster experience, and it was just very enchanting, and there was something so magical about it. So the idea of being able to now apply that to scientific storytelling was very exciting and kind of an undeniable challenge that I had to take on.
So let me ask this question. VR is a medium that allows for interaction, basically the giving of some agency to the audience, right? Unlike film, where you have to be a passive consumer. How has that been as creative people, as people who are used to maybe being more authors of stories, although, again, from the gaming world, that's a very different perspective and a great one. Maybe, Maxime, you can start answering this. What is it like to be giving over control? How do you feel about that as authors or artists, creators?
for sure in the video game industry, we've been trying so much to always center around the character, around the player's experience. I mean, I think we used to have a lot of games that were very linear, that were very narratively driven, and much like a movie. And personally, I appreciate that also. But now we want to craft a module, a system, a sandbox where people can actually create their own stories. We want to create a system where you don't see the game anymore. We don't want to tell you this is where you have to go next in your mission, for instance. We want to make the player feel like maybe they should go explore, meet some people, learn about their stories. Even there are stories of the past, and even though if your main role is to find a target and eliminate that target, we want to make you feel that experience of you found someone in ancient Egypt, for instance. You've understood that the afterlife is very important for them, and then if you help them retrieve their Book of the Dead, then you'll help them in that way. So you don't see the system so much, and I think that's of course a way we want to go in the game industry in the future for sure.
I certainly love that you've now conflated player and student.
Well, it's learners, I guess, is where we'll try to go in the next few years, and I hope an experience like a Discovery Tour will be so normal in 10 years from now. And I feel like the humanities field in universities are changing a lot. I mean, 15 years ago, video games were a heresy. Even movies were still a heresy in some history departments. And now we see researchers trying to remodel landmarks in all different states of their history using digital platforms. And that's... Believe me, in a history field, it's very, very a big change from 2,000 years of using, again, traditional media. That was the book and the artifacts from museums. It's really blooming a lot.
It's very exciting. And I also just want to say, like, when you give a student agency in their learning, that learning must be so much more profound and so much more memorable and stay with them when they have those choices to make.
When we did the Discovery Tour, we actually engaged in a discussion with many professors. One of them at University of Montreal conducted a study while we were developing the Discovery Tour. And so his goal was to understand if people could learn from actually playing a Discovery Tour compared to a traditional classroom. And the results were very surprising. We were not trying to outmatch the teacher, that was never the goal, but to be an additional tool. And so in comparison from a traditional class with a Discovery Tour, they still learn more in the classroom, but with a Discovery Tour alone, without the help of a teacher, they almost learn as much, and that's mind-blowing. That we can get into that immersion strongly enough that we can get people to understand the things that we would traditionally need a teacher for. And so you're in one way to go.
Version 1.0. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
And we always had it in mind actually that the tool would be used by a teacher and the students in a classroom. So we feel like that would be even a stronger experience. But last thing about this, that same professor said, we tested the learning on one defined tour that people were learning about the Library of Alexandria, for instance. But everything that they've seen, we didn't assess that. We didn't try to understand everything that they learned just because they were immersed into ancient Egypt, for instance. But their conception now of ancient Egypt is altered forever, until something new comes out, and that can change that conception. But the way that the players, the learners have seen the Sphinx with the colors, with the beard, with the nose that wasn't broken yet, is very different. You realize that, okay, well, this is not what I expect of ancient Egypt. It's not the monochromatic version, sandblasted. It's a total different experience that we cannot limit easily.
Can I tell a little story about Assassin's Creed? And so I was in Egypt in December to shoot some VR footage, and so I went to visit. I've been to Egypt before, but never to Cairo. So I went to visit the pyramids and the Sphinx. How do you say in English? Sphinx. And so when I visit the Sphinx, you walk around, and then you discover that when I was walking around, they were doing some research, like archaeological research. And then at the back of the Sphinx, there's this little opening. There's like a corridor or something going in, but it's very tiny and I don't know when they discovered it, or I don't know. And so I'm a gamer and I'm a huge fan of Assassin's Creed. And then I was playing Origin, and in January or February I was playing the game, and I get to the Sphinx and I was like, let's see if there is the same little opening behind the Sphinx. And so I go around with my little character, and there it is, the exact same little corridor, exact same small opening I've seen in Egypt with my own eyes, and it blew my mind. There's all the little details. It's so precise, so well done, and so, I mean, thank you for all this research and work you've put behind it. I really loved it. Well, I didn't crawl into the hole in my real life because there is something quite interesting down there in the game.
Exactly.
But I
It would just lead you into an empty pit nowadays.
oh, so sad.
I'm actually going to talk a bit about Spheres because I think this applies most to this.
Yep.
So Spheres is a VR series that I've created with Jess Engel has produced as well. And it tells the story of music in the cosmos. And it's executive produced by Darren Aronofsky. And it stars Jessica Chastain and Patti Smith. And we're doing our 3rd episode right now. So Spheres is an interactive VR experience. And when we started building it, Darren asked me, what is the hero's journey? And my immediate response was to tell him, actually, there's not a hero's journey. This is VR. But suddenly I thought more about that, and they pushed me to really crack that idea open. And I realized that there is a hero in this exploration. And in the first episode we did, you fall into the heart of a black hole. And I realized that the hero is actually you. And so I mapped out the full, the hero's journey, each step, the meeting of the mentor, all these stages that would happen in a traditional film. And I suddenly realized that every single one of those parts of the story do happen, and they happen to you as the viewer. And so that was really exciting because then every single interaction had an intention behind it. And so this question of, how do I maintain control in the experience when you are the one who is navigating it as the character, when you are becoming a star, becoming a black hole, and then ultimately embodying this music of the universe, you have a mission and you have an intention throughout the whole piece. So discovering that was really interesting, and also learning that film and VR really aren't that different, and there's so much you can do to maintain the control as the director, but also give that to you as the viewer to use it as a storytelling tool.
I would push back on that. I mean, I'm not one that believes that VR is the future of cinema.
No, it's not the future of cinema.
But
Certainly
there's
not.
similarities.
There's definitely similarities. I think applying, storytelling tactics that we've used for thousands of years to this medium is a way to embody characters in a totally new way, and to then introduce to VR, how do you become a character and totally separate from cinema, but how do we then, with all of these techniques and the language of film that we're so familiar with, how do we take that and totally turn it on its head to then create a new language in VR?
And the beauty of referencing Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is that that's not a cinema device. That goes back through all different cultures, through all time. Joseph Campbell did those ethnographic sort of myth studies and came up with this hero's journey story that is in all of these cultures. So in a way, that's a device that's innate to our species. Mm-hmm. Like we seem to be programmed for the hero's journey because it comes up over and over and over again. So really what you're saying is there are these classic tropes or tools of storytellers through time that we can think about how do we apply to the new medium.
Especially when you want to make a black hole feel human. I think that was one of the critical elements. How do you really, how do you make that feel like an experience that we can understand? And I think that's through, these very traditional storytelling techniques.
Yep. Well,
I would add something unless we have to switch
go
to
ahead,
the question Q&A.
please.
But this is a question that we've been asking ourselves a lot. In fact, on a daily basis, the question about agency. These days, whenever Felix and I are together, which doesn't happen as often as I would like, we're usually talking about agency and interactivity. If you look at the work we've done in the past, over 20 experiences in VR, in fact, all of them are pretty much passive in that they're more like films. You watch the experience, but you're also, like you said, always, in the case of spheres, a character. It's actually very hard not to be a character in VR because you are at the center of everything at all times. So the first question we ask ourselves in any project is who or what the viewer is, if anything. Often the answer is themselves. The viewer is Paul, Eliza, Celine, whatever. Sometimes we make the viewer something or someone else. In the case of Miyubi, which is a 40-minute scripted comedy set in the 80s, you're literally in the body of a Japanese toy robot that's been gifted to a 10-year-old boy on his birthday. And we chose a Japanese toy robot, a cheap Japanese toy robot, because it aligned with the capabilities that the viewer has in the experience, which are none. You can't do anything. And so when the characters are playing with you or talking to you, you can't respond, you can't move, you can't do anything, but it makes sense. And it really helps, you accept the fact that you can't do anything. But then what if you can do something? A lot of VR today and from the very beginning has been interactive, and the more we've been exploring interactivity ourselves, the question has been, how do you open that Pandora's box of, well, now you can do something, but you can't do everything, because the second you can do anything, you want to do everything, and so you have to sculpt the experience in a way that limits what you can do in a very organic and natural and graceful way. Otherwise, it's like, oh, these are the rules of the game. And that's the last thing I personally want you to think when I mean, games are great, but games are about gaming. I don't want to reduce that. They're about many things. But when you're playing a game, whether it's a sport or board game, a video game, you have a set of rules. You want to figure those rules out, and you want to play those rules. You want to game the game. You want to be like, how do I best play this game? And I think that puts you in a different state of mind than when you're in a more immersive storytelling state of mind. And there is a definite grayscale, and it's like a Venn diagram grayscale thing and we're discovering new things all the time where this all gets exploded. But one of the things we try to do the most when we're talking about this sort of thing is really figure out how do you, like I said, how do you allow the viewer to do something, but make it make sense that, why can I press this button but not knock that down or go through that wall? And that's a very, very tricky problem, but a fun one to explore.
Thank you. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, guys.